When we think about participating in the academic discussion, we often focus on writing, so how to communicate our contribution in written form. However, in order to be able to write well, you need to be able to read well. So in this video, we're going to look at why reading is important for writing, and then how you can read well. Why is reading so important for writing? Why do we need to read in order to write? Well, we said last time that academic writing is participating in a discussion that takes place in writing. This means that whatever you're writing, you must refer to what other scholars have already written and build on that with your own contribution. Just a side note, when we refer to articles, books, and so forth that other people have written, we call them sources. So, clearly, if we always need to use sources, then we need to read a range of sources, in fact, to even take part in this discussion. Reading is important not just before you start writing, but at all points of the writing process. We read in order to, first, understand the field of study more generally. We then read more closely to find a research focus or narrow down to a specific area that we want to write about. We also need to read in order to select and evaluate sources that we want to use in our writing and make sure we understand them fully. We also have to do a lot of close reading in order to integrate material from sources into our own writing, whether we're summarizing ideas, selecting quotations, or critiquing arguments. All of that requires close reading. And as we write, our ideas may also evolve. And when that happens, we may need to go back to the sources to understand them better, or read more to find extra sources to support what we're writing. So, systematic and close reading is an ongoing process that gives you the foundation for your writing. So we know why we need to read, but how do we read well? Reading well is reading actively. Often, reading is a passive activity where you just take in information. For example, when you read a novel or a blog. However, academic reading is active reading. When you read for the purpose of writing, you need to read actively and gather observations about the text. This means that you should always read with a pen in your hand. And what I mean by this is, as you read, you need to be actively highlighting and annotating the text and making notes on things that strike you or interest you or points of view that you disagree with. Reading well is also reading with a purpose in mind. Whenever you sit down to read a text, you should first define your purpose in reading the text. You can think of this purpose as a question you want to answer, and you keep this question in mind as you read the text. For example, while I'm reading a text, I might be thinking, is this text relevant for my research? Or I might be thinking, do I agree with the author's argumentation or their conclusions? Or I might be looking specifically at what evidence the author offers to support their points. Reading well is being able to read strategically. Now, you want to be able to understand your sources. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to start by reading them all the way from the very first word to the very last word. Instead, you should take a strategic approach. As I said just now, you should always define your goal in reading the text. And when you know why you need to read the text, you can use this to help you decide how you need to read the text. There are 3 modes of reading: skimming, scanning, and close reading. Each mode of reading helps you to achieve a different reading goal. When you want to get a general overview of a text, you can skim the text. Skimming means moving your eyes quickly over the text, taking note of major aspects of structure and content. For example, let's say we find a new article and we want to get a general idea of the text in order to decide if it's relevant. We can skim read the text to get an overview. What kind of text is it? How is it structured? Are there different sections? And if so, what are they? Is there a summary or an abstract that we can read to get an idea of the main points? When you're looking for a specific element within the text, you can scan the text. Scanning also means that you move your eyes quickly over the text, but this time, looking for a specific element or keyword. For example, imagine that we want to find out if the author of a text mentions a specific theory or methodology that we're interested in. In this case, we can scan the text, looking out for specific keywords and phrases that relate to the themes that we're interested in. When you want to gain an in-depth understanding of the text, you can do close reading. With close reading, we read the text slowly and in depth, taking time to ensure that we fully understand what the author has written. For example, once we've decided that a text is relevant and we've gained an overview of it and identified important sections, we can then do some close reading to gain an in-depth understanding. When you read for writing, you'll use a combination of skimming, scanning, and close reading to gather, evaluate, and interpret your sources. Lastly, as a student of academic writing, reading is really important to help you improve your writing. In other words, the more you read well-written academic articles, the better your own writing becomes. Why? Because through this reading, you become more and more familiar with academic style and language and learn different ways of expressing your ideas. You can learn a lot about academic writing by studying how other authors have approached their writing. For example, how have they structured their text and how do they incorporate their sources? That's why when we study academic writing skills, we don't just look at what the authors say, but also how they say it. In a nutshell, then, reading is really the foundation of writing. Academic texts always build on the work of other scholars, so it's clear that whatever you write, you've got to read other scholars' work in order to be able to write your own work. In addition, when you read text closely, you can learn a lot about how other authors write, and you can then use that insight to improve your own work. Remember, too, that academic reading is an active process, not a passive one. That means always reading with a purpose or a question in mind and making lots of notes. When you know what your purpose is, you can then read strategically to efficiently extract the information that you need from the text. And you can use a combination of skimming, scanning, and close reading techniques to achieve your reading goals. That's all for this time. See you next time.